This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And make sure to order Jamie Glazov's new critically acclaimed jihadist psychopath, how he is charming, seducing, and devouring us. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, COVID-19, China, and biological weapons attacks. With us this evening, J.R. Nyquist, an expert in geopolitics and the history of communism. He is author of many books, including Origins of the Fourth World War and The New Tactics of Global War. Mr. Nyquist, what an honor and a pleasure to have you here.
Nice to meet you, Jamie. We've emailed quite a bit over the years.
Fantastic. Okay, so let us begin. Now, you're an expert in many things that I want to touch with you on, but just in general, how would you begin a discussion of what's happening here with COVID-19, with the lockdowns, and a lot of this madness that we're seeing and experiencing?
Well, I think that it's a very dangerous moment in history. I will tell you a fact that is very disturbing, something that I've been looking at for the last 2 weeks. As you know, the Russian government has gone to ground. The Chinese government has gone to ground. Nobody's seen the Nicaraguan leader for weeks. Same thing with Maduro in Venezuela. In Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, 80% of the government at any one time is underground in bunkers. They rotate at 14 or 21 days, depending on what part of the government it is. This is a pre-war situation. And when we see the United States has mobilized 1 million men, and you have essential Pentagon staff put in bunkers, you see Cheyenne Mountain as a command post set up again. You have mobilizations of forces. You have bombers, for example, 4 weeks ago, the Strategic Command dispersed its bombers on the pretext that there was danger from tornadoes, and the strategic bombers were pulled out of Guam. Look, we're looking at pre-World War III type moves. And when you have signals coming out of countries like Russia, where in January the entire Russian government is fired, but the prime minister, who is the deputy head of the National Security Council, retains his position. I speculated at the time that the Russian government was going underground and they were putting up their second string for a public face. That's what it looked like then. Now that Putin's underground as well has gone to they've all gone to their vacation bunkers, so to speak. The virus is one of those things that it might be a first move in a third world war. There are sources in China and Southeast Asia that are saying that this virus is a test of our defenses, and it's a disruption weapon, that our economy is disrupted. And this is the biggest disruption of our economy since the Great Depression. Our economy is in serious trouble. There's a potential of food shortages. We look at the oil glut. Our oil industry is taking a beating. And look at what the Russians and the Saudis have done. Do we believe the Saudis for a minute that they were trying to hurt the Russians by increasing their oil production when everybody should have been decreasing it? When we've got tankers stacked up here off of California, loaded with oil with nowhere to offload it, and the price of oil going into negative territory, the damage that that's done to our oil industry. 50 million oil-related jobs globally are at stake here, according to, well, I think I read that in the Wall Street Journal. So this is a crisis of unprecedented dimensions, and it has enormous strategic implications.
Okay, Jeffrey, this is very scary. Let's just backtrack for 1 second. So this is not just some bat in some cave that infected some person. You think that is this a biological weapons attack on us?
Well, let me ask you a question. Wuhan, the city where this started, is where the only level 4 virology lab in China is located. What are the odds that this is ground zero of something if it didn't come from the Wuhan lab? Now, one of two things happened. That thing got out of the lab accidentally, or it was released intentionally. But even if it was released accidentally, when China cut off rail traffic to Wuhan and they let the international flights leave, they had a potluck in Wuhan that the Communist Party hierarchy in China insisted go ahead, a potluck with 40,000 people, where they think that thousands were infected, and they let those people then fly back to Australia, to North America, to Italy, there was one in Sweden. Now you've got thousands of deaths, tens of thousands of deaths all around the world, and we're just at the beginning of this.
So first of all, should not be a surprise in terms of biological weapons, because the Chinese communists have for decades been preparing biological weapons to attack the United States. This is your expertise, and you can confirm this, right?
Well, there is a very interesting speech. General Chi Hao-chen was the defense minister of China from 1993 to 2003. Epoch Times in 2005 published a translation of his speech, a secret speech that he gave, probably sometime between 2001 and 2003, in which he outlined China's strategy and the reasons behind China's strategy. Now, people have called this speech in dispute. I believe this speech is authentic, and I'll tell you why I believe it. In the speech, he claims that China has a Lebensraum problem, and he basically says, well, we can't use the word Lebensraum because it brings up the name of Hitler. But the fact is China's overpopulated, it's got terrible environmental problems, and if it ever should face a real economic decline, there could be social unrest, and the Communist Party could be overthrown, and the communist leadership could be hanged. He said, in order for China to for the Communist Party to vindicate its leadership of China, it must teach the Chinese people to go out. This is the phrase he uses in the speech. And he says that, look, if we take land in some neighboring country, it's trivial. He said, we're going to end up in a war with the United States if we try to take land from India, if we try to take it from Australia or Taiwan. It's not going to work. He said, since we have to take on the United States anyway, no matter who we try to go against, we might as well take the land in the United States. Later on in the speech, he says something very critical, at least to me. He says that we have traded territory in the north for what we need, the lower 48 states. And he says, basically in the speech, they have to exterminate the Americans. He says this is a tragedy, but they have to do it because they need that land to move half the population to China onto. And he said they have to do it with biological weapons, that everything is about developing a biological attack, that China can deny that they have done the attack, and that they can eliminate most of the population here in the United States. Now, this territory, he says that they traded in the north with Russia for the right to have the lower 48 states. In 1999, a Russian defector named Colonel Stanislav Lunev, I was doing work with him. He told me at that time, and he told two other people who are also witnesses, that the last time he was with the general staff in Moscow in 1992, they spoke of a secret deal with China, that Russia would get Alaska and parts of Canada. China would get the lower 48 states, with other countries invited in for looting rights. When I saw that in the speech, I thought, how could that? I had never publicized this. This is something that I knew, that a defector had told me, that two other people heard it too. And here it is in the speech. How can this speech be a fabrication? How could they get this detail? This defector did not share this information very widely. So I was, of course, quite sobered by this discovery. And I've written about this since. And I think if we examine, look, there's things about the Chinese military. You know, their 071 type transport, amphibious transport, according to the internet, it has a range of several thousand miles. It's a long-range amphibious transport. That means from China, that's the distance between China and the U.S. West Coast. Why do they have amphibious transports that can reach the United States?
Wait, Jeffrey. So just wait, Jeffrey. Overall, what you're saying is they launch a biological weapons attack, and then there's an invasion later, right?
Some point later, there is. I believe there's a sequence. I don't understand all of it, but I've been studying the strategic thinking of these people for a long time.
Yeah.
and of the Russians. And I believe if you look at the 2018 um, uh, uh, Vostok exercise, where the Russians massed ships in the Bering Strait, and where the Mongolian and the Chinese military participated, some said this was a practice for invading Alaska. You know that the Duma, you may know this already, the Duma many years ago passed legislation for setting up a government in Alaska. And as you know, Vladimir Zhirinovsky, the clownish head of the Liberal Democratic Party in Russia, sponsored that legislation, said that Alaska belongs to Russia. You've probably heard that before too. It's not just nonsense. There's been many carefully laid plans and schemes regarding this future war against the United States, and China and Russia are together in this.
So Jeffrey, so one scenario is this could be a biological weapon that the Chinese communists were developing, and either intentionally or accidentally it got out, right?
Right. Now, the thing I really look at is whether or not it was intentional. You know that the U.S. ever since 1969, when Nixon got rid of our biological weapons programs, and we did not mass produce biological weapons, lethal biological weapons. Our doctrine, stated doctrine, is if somebody attacks us with a bioweapon, we nuke them. What's interesting about COVID-19 is that by the Chinese giving it to themselves first, they have an alibi. And by making it mild enough so that it mainly kills the weak and the elderly and the infirm,
Right.
in effect, it helps the Chinese regime. Because
Right.
with the one-child policy, China's in a in a condition where after 50 years of a one-child policy, they end up with too many old people. And
Right, and those of us familiar with Mao and the Chinese communists, I mean, they want to kill millions of their own people. I mean, this is just basic.
well, Xi Jinping has three heroes. This has been written about by certain sinologists. I think Stephen Mosher and Bill Gertz has written about it. And it's that his three heroes are Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. And if you look at the Guinness Book of World Records, these are the three greatest mass murderers in the history of the world.
Jeffrey, I wish we had a couple hours to talk just in our remaining minutes. Just let me pick your brain here, and hopefully we'll bring you back. Who is Vladimir Putin?
Vladimir Putin was a KGB officer who became deputy mayor of St. Petersburg. And his job in St. Petersburg was not to foster business, although that ostensibly was his stated outward purpose, but to control it.
Mm-hmm.
You see, when you have an NEP, which Lenin's new economic policy was, when the communist system falls back into a kind of capitalism, they have to manage their capitalism, and they need the KGB to do it. And maybe you know this with having some Soviet background yourself. KGB officers have told me this. The billionaires in Russia, they signed contracts with the KGB. Konstantin Prigozhin, who knew Boris Berezovsky, said that Boris would tell you that he signed a contract with the KGB to become a billionaire. I heard from Marina Kalashnikova, the Russian historian. She told me the story of how Mikhail Khodorkovsky got his position as a billionaire. Some Jewish business people in the West said, wouldn't it be nice if this oil company were run by a nice young Jewish boy? And so they got together and said, who can we sign a contract with? Oh, the second secretary of Komsomol over here, Mikhail Khodorkovsky, we'll recruit him to be a billionaire. This is how the oligarchs, so-called, in Russia got formed. They're all on contract with the KGB. And like Miles Kwok, the Chinese billionaire defector, said, he said the same thing in China. They're recruited to be billionaires. And he said these billionaires, they end up in one of two ways, either in jail or dead in the long run, because they're controlled agents of the state.
Right, and so we know that the Soviet KGB and all those former mafiosi KGB, they're all still in power. So this is another issue for another time whether communism ever really fell. And they're allied with the Chinese, correct?
Yes, and you see this alliance first coming into solid focus during the Kosovo War in 1999, when the Chinese openly started sending high-level generals to Moscow. That was when a kind of revival occurred in Russia. As you remember, the Russian public was 70% positive towards America. When we bombed Serbia, they switched to being 70% negative. And that's when Putin launched his career, was in 1999, when he was appointed prime minister on August, I believe it was August 9th of 1999. And then later at the end of that year, Boris Yeltsin named him president. And he's been basically the leader of the country ever since.
Right, and I think it would be fair to say, allied with their interests was this whole crew, still is, John Brennan, Obama. These are people who want to destroy America, correct?
Well, it's interesting, the Marxist background of Brennan and Obama, even the former FBI director, James Comey. The thing about these people, we have a lot of Marxists here in this country, came out of the colleges and the universities, and they've filled up our government. And Obama, being the protege of Frank Marshall Davis, what is his real ideology? What are his real goals? How do we understand these people? And why did he weaken our defenses to the extent that Obama did? And meanwhile, the Russians were building up their defenses. And I think now we can look back and we can see that Russia has been building up, China has been building up. We haven't built a new nuclear weapon in almost 30 years.
And they all hate Trump. Trump is in the way of this unholy alliance between the left here and all of our adversarial enemies, right? I mean, Trump is trying to save this country, and that's why they hate him so much, and the establishment media is in their pocket.
We're in a very dangerous situation because we had 8 years of Obama disarming us, tearing down the Navy, tearing down the Air Force, tearing down our nuclear forces. Our nuclear arsenal is past its shelf life. It is going to be obsolete very soon. There's been articles about this written. People have been screaming about it. Defense Secretary Robert Gates, in November 2008, you can look this up, he said, we need the reliable nuclear warhead program. We need new nuclear warheads. He tried to get Obama in the first year of Obama to go for it. Obama would not. The Democrats have dragged their feet about it. We have, I think it's fair to say, we have a fifth column in this country that would like to see us spontaneously disarmed. And we have a communist bloc that still exists. Now, you could say anything you want about Russia, but Russia is supporting Nicaragua, North Korea, Cuba, Venezuela. There's Russian troops and Chinese troops in Venezuela. The Russians and Chinese are working together. They're coordinating their arms production together. They're sharing technology.
Jeffrey, what you're saying, so shocking, so scary, and yet so many facts. And one of the reasons it's so shocking is this is never heard anywhere. I mean, why does CNN and MSNBC and all of our establishment media not only just ignore somebody like you, but I would venture to say that you are blacklisted and persecuted, correct?
Well, I'm not really allowed onto places. I mean, look, I've been trying to write, I'm just one person. I don't have a think tank. I'm not able to do this. I was in graduate school years ago. I figured out some things. I tried to talk to people. I did not believe, when I read some of the defector literature, I didn't believe what they were trying to tell me until I met our own experts. And I said, I want to be in a poker game with these people's life savings. They're so naive. It is very difficult. I mean, did you ever know Vladimir Bukovsky at all?
Yes, he was a good friend of our family's.
I had an interview with him a year ago, December, when he was ailing. And I said, it's really true that the conservatives never really understood anti-communism in the West. And he said, yes, that's right. They never did. And I said, why didn't they ever understand it? And he said, because it was very complicated and they wanted it to be simple. And that is a profound statement.
Yeah,
he was
Jeffrey,
exactly right.
Jeffrey, I'm so sorry. Before we go, just our prayers go out for Vladimir. He just passed. What a hero of the 20th century. And our thoughts are with him. Our prayers are with him. Just under a minute, Jeff. Sorry, I wish we had another couple hours. How do we sum this up in under a minute? What we need to keep in mind and perhaps what Americans need to be doing?
I should say Americans need to read and be informed. And there's a lot to know out there, and we don't nearly know enough as citizens. We should not be satisfied with the easy sound bites and the easy answers. We're in a very complicated problem, but the number one thing I want to leave people with is that the most important thing in politics is know who your friends are and know who your enemies are. We should not be in bed with China or Russia. The leaders of those countries, the people are fine. It's the leaders of those countries. They're not good people. They're criminals. And we should never make deals with such criminals.
Absolutely. Jeffrey, where should people visit you to find out what's going on?
jrnyquist.blog is my current blog. That's jrnyquist.blog. And they'll find all my recent articles.
Okay, fantastic. Jeffrey Nyquist, thank you so much for visiting us. Thank you for your bravery and all your truth-telling, for all the research you've done on behalf of our civilization and to defend us, and keep up the brave and noble work, okay?
Well, God bless you, Jamie.
Thank you, Jeffrey. And thank you for joining the Glazov Gang this evening. Go to jrnyquist.blog and follow Jeffrey Nyquist and everything he is researching and trying to warn the world about. We will see you soon on the Glazov Gang. Good night. Soft moment. Good night.